The complete history and reasons of the Israel-Palestine War from the time of Ibrahim until today. According to the reports drilled on during ancient time till now, including those of the federal and economic intelligence, the claims of Jews people starts from religious grounds wherein the holy book for Christians and Jews, specifically in the first book of the prophet Moses known as Genesis and verses of chapter 12, has been ambiguous to their neighbors, especially those who do not believe in the words of the Bible. Here I mean Arabs and their allies. In there, the Bible shows how Abraham was called by God the Creator of everything to willingly serve Him, which of course marked this today's perplexing. The area of Palestine, formerly known as the land of Canaan, is the origin of the three main religions basing their faith on Abraham. These religions are the religion of the Jews, the Christianity, and later after Jesus, the Islamic emerged. Jews believe in Judaism, which bases on the book called Bible, involving the Old Testament, which begins with the 5 books of Moses, namely Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Christianity begins with the foundations from the Old Testament to the New Testament, teaching the salvation through Jesus Christ, and the Islam holding the 4 books of the prophet Moses known as Turat, Zabur of the prophet Dawood, the Gospel of Jesus, and the Quran brought by Muhammad. Abraham, a resident of Ur today marked to be in Iraq and of the Hebrew tribe, migrated from Iraq to Haran, an area in Syria, and later went to stay in Canaan, where God appeared to him in a dream and sworn to Abraham that all that land had been given to him and his descendants. The book makes it clear that God himself promised blessings, that is, to be upon everyone who blesses Abraham's descendants, and that all the families of the world would be blessed because of Abraham his servant. The Almighty God told Abraham that his descendants would go into slavery in Egypt for 400 years until the 4th generation, waiting for somebody who would take them home in Canaan, which is in Palestine. They waited in torture, hatred, and harsh treatment until Moses came and took them back to Canaan. The exact roots of dispute begins in the 19th century, when the movement of Zionism and Arab nationalism emerged, and when the Jews movement was established as a political movement in 1892 against Russia and Europe. The wind began blowing when all Jews decided to return to the land of Palestine, where they consider it to be their homeland, as scriptures from the Holy Bible nail it. The hatred against Judaism and Jews in Europe during the 20th century led to the Zionist movement to gain strength, aiming at establishing a Jewish state no matter what was ahead. There is an area in Palestine which is exactly between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. This area is considered sacred by Christians, Jews, and Muslims. This is why even the wars you hear there have something to do with religious belief. For the mission to be fulfilled, the Zionists and Jewish National Fund encouraged immigration and pushed the purchase of the very land which was under Ottoman and British rule in those days. After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in World War I, Britain was required to administer Palestine with a specific permission from UN. British promises to Arabs and Jews did not be fulfilled due to the division of France and the Middle East, hence later Britain caused conflict known as Hussein-McMahon Correspondence and the Balfour Declaration of 1917. It was the beginning of frequent outbreaks of fightings between Arabs and Jews in the land of Palestine. The mass migration of Jews to Canaan led by the Zionist ideology initiated tension between Arabs and Jews. The tension between Arab nationalists and Zionists led to clashes between Jewish military groups and Arab gangs. Adolf Hitler attempted to wipe out the nation because it was said to be of Jews, but in vain, though many Jews lost their lives. After the Second World War, there came a pressure to establish a Jewish state. The original plan was to divide the area between the Jews and the Palestinians, and the UN agreed to the partition of the land of Palestine for Jews and Palestinians in 1947. In the same year 1947, a war between Jews and Palestinians occurred because the Jews agreed to divide Palestine into 2 lands, but the Palestinians and Arab countries refused. These Palestinians refused because Jews and them had never been friends. They fought since the era of Samson, and the kings of both sides had been enemies since long ago. The war between Palestinians and Jews led to Palestinians to run and hide to neighboring Arab countries as refugees. 1 year after, Israel declared its independence. It was on May 14, 1948. From the very day, the tension went from being an issue between Palestine and Israel to a regional issue, Now the war was to be fought by whoever is Arab. Soon after the independence, the Arab nations Egypt, Syria, Jordan and Iraq planned to attack Israel, and the war known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War outbroke. These countries invaded this region if Israel believing to conquer. This war was the first war between the Arabs and Israel. The war is known by the Jews as the War of Liberation. After the war, the area originally agreed on by the UN for the Palestinians was reduced by half because Israel emerged victorious, conquering areas beyond the original map and dividing the city of Jerusalem. 750,000 Palestinians fled to neighbor countries and others captured as captives of war by Jewish military forces. In the 1967 Six-Day War between Israel and the Arabs, which Israel won, leaving great losses to its enemies, Arab countries didn't believe what they got as a result. The war caused Israel to take over other lands and finally tripled its previous size. It was a victory for Israel against the Arabs. Israel captured the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the West Bank from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. Hundreds and thousands of Palestinians fled the land and left it into the hands of Jews. Israel was victorious of the war because of the methods and good preparations that had been made, especially attacking before the enemy attacks. Remember, the Arabs had decided to erase Israel from the map. Therefore, if the Jews had waited for the Arabs to attack first, Israel would have been totally erased. During the 1967 war between Israel and Arabs, Israel fought with a good number of countries, which were Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, with full military support from Sudan, Iraq, and Algeria, which sent soldiers and weapons. Russia was also helping Arab countries with a lot of military weapons. On the side of Israel, UN, England and France sent full support of weapons and strategic means of winning the war. You may ask yourself, what was the reasons why this war occurred and still never ends? The answers are as follows. Jewish tradition claims that the area where Israel is located is the land promised and given by God to Abraham and his descendants, while Palestinians claim that is their land, stating no trace of their origin before inhabiting Palestine. The area was invaded in the past by the Romans, Babylonians, Persians, Assyrians, and Macedonians. It was long ago, before Jesus Christ. Before today's generation. It is believed that the Roman Empire which ruled this area is the one that named the very area and called it Palestine. The religion named Islam came with total teachings that are against the Jews. It is a religion that came from Arabs, and this enabled the formation of military groups with intention of fighting wars against Israel. When Islam gained power in the 7th century after Jesus Christ, Palestine fought wars but was conquered by the Arabs, the Crusaders from Europe, and Ottoman took the area until the First World War, when the British order was imposed. Syria had been teasing Israel. It always needed to be in conflict with Israel. The Syrian army used the Golan Heights, which are 3,000 feet above the Galilee, to attack villages and farms in Israel. These attacks from Syria increased in 1965 to 1966. By then, Israel was complaining to the UN, but no helping measures were taken, though the attacks were well supported by Russia. These attacks went hand in hand with terrorist acts against Israel, where the Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser said that they would not get into Palestine if the land is covered with sand rather than with blood. His statement meant to motivate Arab countries, thinking that it would be easy to invade and erase Israel, insisting after few months that the desire of the Arabs is to see the Palestinians liberated and remove the Jewish state by annihilation. Syria, with support from Arabs, did not stop attacking Israel till April 1966. In 1967, Syria, using MiG-21 aircraft got from Russia, attacked some villages in Israel from the Golan Heights. Jews' army didn't sit and watch. They shot down 6 Syrian aircrafts. This succeeded due to wrong information that Syria was fed by Russia, that Israel was preparing for war despite Israel's denial, but Syria organized itself by establishing a cooperation agreement with Egypt. May 15th is an important day to Jews. It is a day in 1967, when Egyptian army crossed the border to Sinai near the border with Israel. In 3 days later, Syria prepared its army and invaded Israel through the Golan Mountains. Before starting bombing, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the president of Egypt, ordered the UN forces protecting Israel to leave Sinai immediately without involving the Union. Egypt started by closing the Strait of Tiran and blocked all ships from the east heading to Israel. They also blocked Iranian ships that were delivering petroleum. By doing so, the Egyptian government decision violated international law by invading Israel without following war laws. They knew they were completely going to fight and win the war. And through their radio, the Arabs announced by saying, "Now that the international army that was protecting Israel has left, we will not tolerate more or complain about the unity of nations, but one thing we will do is to fight it and eradicate Zionist politics." In addition to that, the Minister of Defense of Syria Hafez Assad came out and confirmed they're willing to invade Israel by giving a very hard speech. He said, "Our forces are ready to wipe out Israel. Our forces are now entirely ready not only to repulse the aggression, but to initiate the act of liberation itself." The United States President condemned the act of Arabs to announce the invasion of Israel, especially by blocking the Straits of Tiran, which was internationally agreed on, that the Israel would use it to pass its basic needs. He said that Egypt's action was against the law of the sea signed in 1958. By this agreement, the UN recognized Israel's right to use the Straits of Tiran to pass ships from any country in the world. Israel was provoked by Arabs claiming that Israel should go to the field of war because Arabs were ready to listen to nobody wishing to come with negotiation because they had been at war with Israel since before 1948. They insisted that the armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon had settled on the borders of the entire Israel, and behind them were armies of Iraq, Algeria, Kuwait, Sudan, Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arab countries in the world. Arabs were more proud knowing that the whole world would be amazed and know that these Arabs were armed ready for war. A country like Iraq did not stay behind. Abdur Rahman Arif, who was the president of Iraq, came out and said that the existence of the nation of Israel was a mistake that had to be corrected. He added that it was the time to erase the shame they had had since 1948. He continued saying that their goal was to erase Israel from the map. Immediately after his statement, Iraq sent forces to join other Arab forces that were prepared to attack Israel on the June 4th. Arab forces were estimated to be 465,000 soldiers, 800 aircraft sent on spot to surround Israel, together with more than 2,900 tanks. We all know that Israel is a country with smart people when dealing with national intelligence. Their spies had already brought full information about what Arabs intended to do. Israel was on alert 3 weeks before, and the 3 weeks were used to import weapons from America, England, France, and the Western countries. These weapons were silently received through the port city of Haifa. Oh, here is how the game was played. First, Israel knew who are its enemies and played a trick on them. Israel opened its borders shared with Egypt to allow Egyptian spies to enter into Israel and exit to report to Egyptian army. The information they collected was wrong because Israel knew what to feed them at the very moment. The weapons that arrived in the city of Haifa were taken to the Gulf of Aqaba. Aqaba is an area in Israel with forests and rocks. Jews were taking weapons to this area during the day and take them back to Haifa at night where they stored them in trenches. So the Arabs watching knew that Israel's weapons were kept to the Gulf of Aqaba while they were not. There was another thing that helped Israel to maintain its status. It was the deception done by Jews. When the Arabs declared war on Israel, Israel called all its commanders who were on vacation to return to work, and the ministers who were on a visit to return immediately. Soon after this call, Israel announced that the commanders who were on vacation should continue with their vacations because it seemed that the Arabs were only threatening them. There will be no war, the government announced. Arabs knew that Israel has been deceived while Israel was strongly preparing. The American government tried hard to convince Egypt and the Arabs to stop the war plan, but these Arabs did not agree on that because they wanted Israel erased. From that day, the President of the United States was angry and eagerly announced that Israel would not be alone in the war, but only if it wants to be. It was a strong and clear message that America would not leave Israel alone on the field of war. That was to mean that they are ready to help by any means. The Prime Minister of Israel, Levi Eshkol, ordered Jewish army to attack Egypt on the June 5, 1967. At this moment Israel was alone, using its commanders armed with a special strategy to die or save their country. It was a bad day to Arabs because the entire Israel's air force left towards Egypt around 1 o'clock in the morning. They bombed and destroyed all the Egyptian airfields while the pilots of the planes prepared for departure towards Israel were sitting having breakfast. Within 2 hours, 300 Egyptian military planes had been bombed and destroyed. Some hours later, Israeli planes went straight towards Syria and attacked the air forces of Jordan and Syria together with the planes from Iraq which were going to help Arabs. When it reached evening of the first day of the war, all the Egyptian and Jordanian planes and half of the Syrian planes had been destroyed while on the airfields waiting to fly towards Israel. Israel did not wait for the enemies to fight him on his land. This incident led Egypt, which was a country with a strong military forces with enough tanks and war vehicles, to begin preparing to cross the bridge of the Suez Canal by sending 20,000 soldiers to the Sinai Peninsula ready to block or fight the Jews. By so saying, the Israel's army reinforced the operation by sending soldiers and weapons to Sinai, and then by using its planes destroyed the Suez bridges to make sure that no military aids or food would cross to help the Egyptian forces that had already crossed. Then, face-to-face war on ground started where soldiers and tanks fought unmercifully between the Egyptian and Jewish forces. The attacks did not fall over Egypt and Syria alone. Jordan was also crushed by military forces from Israel. Palestinians who lived in the west bank of the Jordan River had to flee to Jordan to escape the fire from Israel's commanders. Some few soldiers of Israel were given tasks to prevent the Syrian forces, while a serious war continued between Jewish soldiers and the Egyptian army and Jordan until they realized that they had beaten and weakened military forces from Egypt and Jordan. Thereafter, the entire air force of Israel attacked the Golan Mountains following Syrian army. 2 days of heavy bombardment were enough for Israel to penetrate into Syrian line. On the other side, after 6 days of heavy bombardment, Israel was eagerly able to enter Amman, Cairo and Damascus without hindrance from any Arab forces. At the same time, the goal to capture Sinai and the Golan military strategic areas had been achieved. It was therefore in hands of Jews. Israel, with mercy, had no intention to fire the capital cities of those countries, though they had the power to do so if they wanted. While the fire was falling over Arabs, Russia was totally confused by the means Israel used to hit Arabs and threatened to intervene the war. Suddenly, Israel was advised by American leaders to accept the call to cease fire. Israel accepted the advice and stopped fighting on the June 10th. Both sides, Israel's and Arab states, lost their soldiers, civilians, and other war equipments. During the Golan man-to-man fighting, Israel lost 115 soldiers and 46 planes. On the side of Arabs, Egypt lost 15,000 military men, Syria lost 2,500 soldiers, and Jordan lost more than 800 soldiers, plus unnumbered soldiers from Arab countries that went to help Egypt and Syria. At the end of the war, Palestine had lost a large area of its land, while Israel had tripled its territory from 800 square miles to more than 26,000 square miles. This victory made Jerusalem, Sinai, Golan, Gaza Strip and the west bank of Jordan River be part of Israel's land till today. The hatred you see today between Israel and Palestine was there even since the days of Jesus on earth, and won't end until Jesus himself comes back. Follow us and get the details of all wars fought by Israel. Next, we're gonna talk about the Yom Kippur War.